You never expect betrayal to arrive with a smile, but mine did. That's how it started. Not with thunder. Not with shattering glass. Not with the kind of warning a person deserves before their world is turned upside down. No, betrayal dressed itself in politeness, rang my doorbell, and waited patiently on my porch. And that's the part that still makes me shiver. Because if you had asked me that morning, I'd have told you my life was quiet, safe, predictable. I'd have said my house was the one thing in this world I could depend on. My roots were in those walls, my history was carved into every corner. But betrayal doesn't care about history. It doesn't care about roots. It arrives when you least expect it, smiling like it belongs there. To anyone else, my house would look ordinary, a modest two-story tucked behind an old oak, its green shutters fading, its porch sagging gently under the weight of time. But to me, it was sacred ground. My husband laid the foundation with his own hands the summer before we married. I planted roses out front, the same roses that bloomed defiantly each spring, no matter how cruel the winter had been. Every creak in the floorboards held a story. Every chipped tile whispered of children's laughter, of late-night arguments, of reconciliations over coffee at dawn. That house wasn't just wood and nails. It was memory. It was my anchor. My proof that I had lived a life worth telling. So when they came for it, they were not just coming for a building. They were coming for me. It was a Thursday evening, too late for visitors, too early for trouble. The sun had already bled into the horizon, leaving streaks of orange and violet across the sky. I sat in the living room, knitting needles in hand, when the knock came. Not the hurried pounding of emergency. Not the gentle tap of a neighbor. A firm, deliberate knock, the kind that assumes it will be answered. My first thought was my son. Maybe he had stopped by with his wife. Maybe they had brought the children. That hope alone was enough to make me rise with a small smile. But when I opened the door, the smile faltered. It was them. Not my son, not really, but the version of him that belonged to his wife. She stood beside him, lips curved in that false smile she wore whenever she wanted something. And behind them stood a stranger, a man in a sharp suit, briefcase in hand. A lawyer. I didn't need a crystal ball to know this wasn't a friendly visit. "Mother," my son began, his voice coated in that awkward warmth people use when they are about to hurt you but don't want to feel guilty. "We thought we had stopped by." His wife added quickly, voice sweet and practiced. "Yes, we didn't want to bother you, but we have something important to discuss. Something good for everyone. Good for everyone." I have lived long enough to know that phrase is poison. Still, I stepped aside, hands trembling slightly as they crossed the threshold. The lawyer followed last, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood as though he already owned it. They sat together on the couch, side by side, rehearsed, poised. The lawyer remained standing near the mantel, surveying the room like a man appraising his next acquisition. The mask slipped quickly. The lawyer cleared his throat and drew a stack of documents from his briefcase. "Mrs. Williams," he said smoothly, "I am here to finalize the transition of ownership for this property." My heart lurched. "Excuse me?" My son shifted, eyes avoiding mine. His wife leaned forward, her tone syrup soft. "Oh, Mother, it's already done. You signed it months ago, remember? We were just here to help you with the final steps." My knitting needles clattered to the floor. "Signed it? Months ago?" My hands, the same hands that baked bread for those children, that held my husband through sickness and health, had never signed away my home. "I never signed anything of the sort," I whispered. The lawyer's eyes glimmered. Not with surprise. With satisfaction. He slid the top page toward me, tapping the signature line. "Here is your signature." Clear as day. And there it was, my name, scrawled in black ink. My handwriting, or something that looked chillingly close. My blood ran cold. "Mother," my son said again, this time pleading. "It's for the best. The upkeep is too much for you. We will take care of the house, and you will be free to relax. To live without worry. Relax? Without worry? How could I relax knowing the walls that held my memories would no longer be mine? Questions thundered through my mind. Who forged my signature? Was it her? Him? Both, whispering behind my back while I cooked Sunday dinners. And then I saw it. The lawyer watching me, his lips curving, not with kindness, not with reassurance, but with a smirk. Small, sharp, certain. The look of a man who knew a secret I didn't. The look of a man who believed he had already won. I stared at that smirk and felt something larger than greed quail around me, a trap I had not seen, one I had stepped into willingly. This wasn't just family tension. This was strategy. And in that moment, standing in my own living room with my blood turning to ice, I understood something chilling. The fight for my home had only just begun. You think betrayal signs its name in ink? No. It signs in blood. That's the thought that struck me as the paper slid across my coffee table, cold, deliberate, and final. Their edges gleamed under the lamplight like blades waiting to cut through my peace. My son's wife pushed them forward with the confidence of a woman who had already rehearsed my surrender. Just sign here, Mother, she said, her voice soft but poisonous. Everything will be easier if you cooperate. Easier. I have learned that word's true translation, easier for them, never for you. I stared at the papers, the black print, the embossed seals, the imitation of my name scrawled at the bottom, and felt my chest tighten. Someone had tried to erase me with the stroke of a pen. But what they didn't know was that this house, this home, was never just property. It was paid for in sweat, sealed in love, and bound by something stronger than ink. It was bound by a promise. The memory hit me like a storm. Robert had come home from the mills, hands blistered, shirt damp with sawdust and oil. He dropped a thick envelope on the table, money, neatly banded, heavy with hope. Down payment, he said. For our house. I laughed. I cried. I thought it was a miracle. But miracles always come with fine print. When we went to sign the deed, I noticed things. The realtor smiled too wide. The lawyer's hand trembled as he passed the pen. And Robert didn't let me sign. Let me handle this, he said. You just trust me. At the time, I thought he was being noble. Now, I realize he was being protective. Because when we stood on that porch with the brass key in hand, Robert leaned close and whispered, "Don't ever let anyone take this house from you. Promise me." And I did. Decades later, that promise burned like fire in my throat as I stared at the papers before me, the ones trying to rewrite our lives. "This is fake," I said, my voice firm. "You think you can fool me with forgeries?" The lawyer smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Forgery is such an ugly word, Mrs. Williams. Let's call it a correction. Your late husband clearly wanted the property to pass to your family. We were merely fulfilling his wishes." Robert's wishes? The word struck me like ice water. Robert would never have wanted this. He died protecting this home, and yet here was this stranger, invoking his name like a weapon. I snatched the top page, my eyes darting through the paragraphs until they landed on a tiny line buried deep within the legal jargon. A clause written in smaller type, almost invisible. In the event of the primary owner's death, transfer of ownership may be enacted upon agreement by surviving family members. My blood ran cold. Surviving family members, my son, his wife, and me. But I had not agreed. I never even knew this clause existed. So how had it been activated? Unless Robert had known. Unless he had buried something, a safeguard, hidden in the papers all those years ago. "Mother," my son's wife cooed, her tone sugar-sweet, her eyes glinting, "please don't make this difficult. We were only doing what's best." Best? Another word that always hides a blade. Best for who? I asked quietly. The air tightened. Her smile froze, and the lawyer stepped closer, setting a pen neatly beside the stack. "Sign," he murmured, almost kindly. "And this all goes away." The ink glistened, thick, black, permanent. But I wasn't watching the pen. I was watching him. The way his thumb tapped the edge of the folder. Once, twice, pause, twice again. A rhythm. A code. He wasn't just nervous. He was signaling someone. There was something far darker behind this visit. And the house, my house, was at the center of it. That night, after they left, silence filled the house like fog. The walls seemed to breathe. The air carried that old familiar scent, sawdust, oil, and the faintest trace of my husband's cologne. I sat alone in the living room, the documents spread across the table like corpses. Robert's voice echoed in my mind, "Don't ever let anyone take this from you." I couldn't shake the feeling that he had known this would happen, that he had left something for me, buried where no one else would look. Something only I was meant to find. I tore through drawers until my hands were raw. Receipts, photographs, letters, all scattered like fallen leaves. My heart pounded with every memory I disturbed. And then, a faint memory. Robert's desk. The old one in the back room. The one I had never dared to open. I stumbled toward it, the floor creaking under my steps. My hands gripped the brass handle, pulling until it groaned open. Dust rose like smoke, glittering in the moonlight. At first, nothing but clutter, pens, old tax papers, a rusted pocket knife. But then I saw it, a folder. Faded, yellowed, edges frayed by time. Across the cover, written in Robert's steady hand, were 5 words that froze me where I stood. House clause, read only if needed. My breath trembled. If needed. What had Robert foreseen? Who had he feared? The folder felt alive in my hands, humming with decades of secrets. I could almost hear his voice, low, urgent, telling me to be careful. I lifted the cover slowly, knowing that whatever lay inside could change everything. And in that moment, a terrible truth settled in my bones. This wasn't just about property. It was about a secret my husband had buried, one powerful enough that someone, somewhere, was still willing to forge, threaten, and burn just to uncover it. The truth doesn't stay buried forever. Sometimes, it waits in the dark, holding its breath. That thought burned through me as I stared at the folder in my lap, faded, fragile, yet alive with meaning. My husband's handwriting looped across the cover like a whisper from another world. House clause, read only if needed. Needed. If this moment didn't count as needed, then nothing ever would. I inhaled deeply, steadying my shaking hands, and lifted the cover. Inside were pages stained with age, legal papers, scribbled notes, brittle receipts from banks that no longer existed. But among them, one line caught my eye, written in Robert's hurried scrawl: "If anything happens, check the attic." The attic. That dusty, forgotten world above the ceiling, the one place in the house ID refused to go for years. ID always hated it. The way the floorboard sighed underfoot, the cold air that whispered secrets to the rafters. But now, it wasn't just a storage space. It was a message. A test. A lifeline. If Robert had hidden something there, it was time to find it. The pull cord dangled from the ceiling like a snake waiting to strike. I tugged it down, and the attic ladder unfolded with a groan, dust cascading over me in soft clouds. The air smelled of wood rot and memory. Attics, I muttered under my breath. Always the attic. The steps creaked beneath my weight, each one protesting my climb. My knees ached, my breath came shallow, but I pressed on. Stubbornness was the only thing that had ever kept me alive. When my head rose through the opening, the attic greeted me with a stale breath of air. I reached for the single dangling bulb and pulled the string. It flickered twice, then glowed, casting a weak amber light over the forgotten world above my home. Boxes stacked like tombstones. Furniture under ghostly sheets. A child's rocking horse missing an eye. Time stood still up there, thick, unmoving, patient. But somewhere in that stillness, my husband had hidden something. Something that could save me. I moved carefully across the creaking boards, brushing aside cobwebs that clung to my sleeves like desperate hands. My fingers trailed over boxes labeled in Robert's handwriting: Christmas, tools, old clothes. Nothing unusual. Nothing alive. Then I saw it. A torn scrap of paper pinned under a broken picture frame. The ink was faint, but the handwriting was unmistakable. You are close. Keep looking. My heart stuttered. Robert had planned this. He knew someone, maybe our own son, might come for the house one day. And he had left a trail for me to follow. I searched faster now, prying open boxes, moving old furniture aside, my heart pounding with every discovery. Another note fluttered loose beneath a folded quilt: not here. Keep faith. Then another, wedged between two old books, almost there. The messages grew more hurried, the handwriting shakier. I could almost see him, Robert, crouched here years ago, scribbling these notes with trembling hands, racing against time. And then, beneath a warped dresser, I saw it. A box. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox, its wood dark and aged, its corners banded with tarnished brass. A heavy, ornate lock sealed it shut. And carved into the lid, burned deep into the grain, were two letters: R.W. Robert Williams. My husband. I dragged it into the light, coughing as dust exploded around me. The lock felt unnaturally cold beneath my fingers, colder than the air itself. Whatever was inside had been waiting too long. But I didn't have the key. At least, I thought I didn't. Then I remembered the pocket watch. Robert's watch. He never went anywhere without it. I had kept it in my dresser since the day he died, and by some quiet habit, I had slipped it into my pocket that morning. Without knowing why, I pulled it out, the silver cool against my palm. My thumb brushed the clasp, and there it was. A small, almost invisible notch, carved into the hinge. A hidden key. The lock clicked open with a metallic sigh. I lifted the lid. Inside were more papers, some brittle with age, others neatly folded. Deeds. Letters. Legal correspondence with signatures I didn't recognize. It was like staring into the veins of a conspiracy that had begun long before I ever suspected it. At the bottom, beneath wax paper, was one final document. It looked new. Untouched. Waiting. A letter written in Robert's hand. The sight of his writing after all these years made my throat tighten. I unfolded it slowly. The paper trembled between my fingers as his words came alive. Margaret, if you are reading this, it means my fears came true. The house, the claws, the family, they will come for it. But remember, the ink on the deeds is not the final word. Look closer. There is protection written within the contract itself, something only you can claim. Trust the date, not the names. It's the key to everything. Robert, the date, not the names. I read it again and again, the words carving themselves into my bones. It wasn't just a warning, it was a code. Robert had hidden something in the original deed. Something legal. Something binding. A clause within a clause. I was so close. So close to understanding. But before I could finish reading, the house whispered again. Soft. Measured. Deliberate. Footsteps. My pulse stopped. The attic ladder was still down. The door below creaked, then slammed shut. The noise rolled through the house like thunder, then silence fell, heavy, suffocating silence. Then came another creak. Someone was on the stairs. I froze, clutching the box to my chest. Each step below me groaned under the weight of an intruder. The air grew tighter, thinner, as the ladder trembled with their first step. Was it my son? His wife? The lawyer? Or someone worse, someone sent by whoever had forged those papers? The bulb above me flickered. Once. Twice. Then, quiet. Too quiet. I tried to move, but my hands were shaking too hard. The box slipped. It hit the floor with a thunderous crack, scattering papers into the air like startled birds. The letter flew from my grip, vanishing into the shadows. I scrambled after it, breath ragged, heart pounding, as the first shadow appeared in the doorway below. A silhouette. Tall. Still. Watching. The air seemed to stop moving. My fingers closed around the scattered pages just as the figure reached the top of a ladder. And then, stillness. They stood there. Not speaking. Not breathing. Just watching me. The light flickered once more, and went out. Darkness swallowed the attic whole. They thought I was weak. They forgot I still had teeth. The silence after the attic discovery was unbearable. The dust-choked box had whispered truths I didn't yet fully understand, but I knew enough to grasp one thing: the battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The footsteps outside the attic door had not been my imagination. They had been deliberate, slow, testing the boards the way a predator tests the air before striking. By the time I shut the box beneath a moth-eaten quilt, the door creaked open. Shadows stretched long and sharp, and there they stood. The so-called family. My husband's bloodline. My vultures. "Oh, Auntie," Marjorie cooed, her painted lips curling into that kind of smile you could choke on. "We were so worried about you, all alone up here." Worried. The word dripped from her tongue like honey laced with cyanide. Behind her stood Richard, jaw locked, eyes sharp. He didn't bother pretending concern. No, he was a man measuring his prize before taking it. I wrapped my shawl tighter, playing the part. The fragile widow. The trembling relic. "How kind of you to think of me," I said softly, my voice sugar-coated. Inside, my pulse was steady. Calculating. Ready. Marjorie's gaze darted across the attic, taking in every disturbed patch of dust. Her fake warmth wavered when she spotted the disturbed corner. Richard stepped closer, boots thudding with authority. "You shouldn't be up here," he said, voice low. "Attics can be dangerous." Dangerous? I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "It's only dust and boxes. Nothing dangerous but memories." They didn't buy it. They could smell the secret. Marjorie's perfume cut through the stale air as she leaned in. "We just want to help, Auntie. You don't need to worry about all this. Papers, property, legal things. We will handle it. It's too much for you." There it was, the slip. The hunger in her tone. They were not here for me. They were here for what my husband left behind. I let a hint of iron edge my words. "How generous of you. But Robert always said this house was my kingdom. Surely you wouldn't take that away from me." Richard's jaw tightened. Marjorie's eyes flicked to him, waiting for direction. "The thing is," he said carefully, "Uncle's will, it wasn't thorough. There are gaps. Loopholes. Assets that might not belong solely to you." Oh, they thought they were clever. Thought they were teaching me something. But my husband was smarter than all of them combined. Because in that box, among the yellowed deeds and brittle letters, was a clause. Hidden like a blade under velvet. A clause that named me not just caretaker, but executor. The true keeper of what they thought they could steal. I made a show of glancing nervously toward the quilt. A baited gesture. Marjorie noticed. Like a magpie drawn to something shiny, she moved fast. "What's this, Auntie?" she asked, crouching near the quilt with that sweet, venomous voice. "Oh, just old things," I stammered. "Memories, you know. I like to sit with them sometimes." Richard shoved her aside, yanking away the quilt. The box gleamed faintly in the weak attic light, brass corners catching fire. His grin widened. "This," he said, breath sharp with triumph, "is exactly what we have been looking for." I clutched my shawl tighter, letting my voice tremble. "Looking for? But why? Let them underestimate me. Let them think they had already won. They wrestled with the lock. Richard pulled a thin tool from his pocket, too practiced. My stomach turned. The lid gave way with a metallic sigh, spilling papers across the attic floor. Deeds. Contracts. Letters in Robert's handwriting. And there, half buried, was the page I had glimpsed before. The hidden clause. I moved faster than instinct. My hand shot out, snatching the paper before they could blink. "What's that?" Marjorie barked. "Nothing," I said quickly, pressing it to my chest. But it was everything. The letter. The shield. The salvation my husband had written into the bones of our legacy, a clause ensuring that in any dispute, his spouse would hold controlling power until death. It was brilliant. And it was mine. "Hand it over," Richard ordered, stepping closer. I shook my head, paper crackling in my grip. "You wouldn't understand." He snarled, "Stop playing games, old woman." That did it. The mask dropped, from all of us. I straightened, voice ringing with the fire they had tried to smother for years. "This house was built with my husband's sweat, and mine. You think you can slither in here and claim it? Smile your way into what you didn't earn? I may be old, but I am not dead. And I am not yours to push." The words hummed between us like the toll of a bell. Even they flinched. For the first time, they saw me, not the fragile widow, but the woman who had survived war, loss, and time itself. But their shock was short-lived. Marjorie's eyes went hard. With a sudden strike, she clawed up my wrist. Pain flashed white. The paper slipped. "No." I gasped. Richard dove, faster than thought, snatching the claws from the floor. Triumph glinted in his eyes like broken glass. Marjorie snapped the box shut, shoving the papers inside. "We will take this," she said coldly. "For safekeeping. You rest, Auntie. We will handle everything." I lunged forward, rage splitting my chest. "You don't know what you are doing. Those papers, they will damn you before they save you." But they were already gone. Feet pounding down the attic ladder. My husband's secrets, my only shield, cradled in their greedy arms. The attic spun around me, air thick with dust and fury. My heart thundered against my ribs as their footsteps faded into silence below. The last thing I saw was Marjorie's smirk, sharp and satisfied, as she pulled the attic door shut behind her. The box. The claws. The proof. Gone. But not for long. Because if they wanted war, they had just declared it. And they had forgotten one simple truth: I still had teeth. In court, truth is just another weapon. And I was about to draw mine. Courthouses have a smell. Not the sharp tang of bleach like a hospital, or the dry, nostalgic dust of an attic. No, this was something different. A scent woven from polished oak, stale coffee, and nerves. The air itself felt heavy, like it remembered every lie ever told within those walls. I could taste it on my tongue as I stepped through the double doors, leaning on my cane as if every step were a burden. Let them think I was weak. Let them see nothing but an old woman playing out her final years. That illusion was my armor. Across the aisle sat Marjorie and Richard, my beloved in-laws, dressed like royalty on parade. Marjorie's pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights, so white they looked like stolen teeth. Richard's suit was crisp, not a wrinkle out of place. And beside them sat two lawyers with shark-like grins and folders piled like fortresses. They didn't just look confident, they looked entitled. As if the court already belonged to them. I lowered my gaze, shuffled to my seat, and felt their satisfaction radiate across the aisle. Good. Let them enjoy their victory lap. For now. All rise. Every chair scraped back in unison as Judge Harrington entered, a stern man carved from old oak himself. His hair was thin, his eyes sharp enough to cut through pretense. He took his seat like a king who had seen too many fools kneel before him. The bailiff's voice rang out. Case of the estate of Henry Whitaker versus claimants Richard Whitaker and Marjorie Simmons. Hearing my husband's name aloud was like a nail through the heart. Henry. If only he could see what vipers his kin had become. If only he could see what I was about to do in his name. Their lawyer rose, a slick, silver-tongued man with a face made for false sympathy. Your Honor, he began, voice dripping with rehearsed humility, my clients come here only in pursuit of fairness. The late Mr. Whitaker's estate, as grand as it is, was never meant to burden one frail widow. The properties, the businesses, these require capable hands. My clients merely seek to ensure that Mr. Whitaker's legacy is protected, as he himself would have wanted. He gestured toward Marjorie and Richard, who bowed their heads like grieving saints in a stained glass painting. A performance. A farce. He went on, speaking of misfiled papers, failing memory, and an elderly widow perhaps too fragile to manage complex affairs. Each phrase was a knife wrapped in silk. And I let them cut. I folded my hands. I let my shoulders sag. They wanted to see a relic of a woman drowning in confusion. I gave them exactly that. For now. When the lawyer finally sat, smirking like a cat who had licked the cream clean, my attorney leaned in. Ready? He whispered. I rose slowly, the wood of my cane tapping against the marble floor. Every eye followed me as I made my way to the stand. My late husband, Henry. I began, voice trembling just enough to sound real. He loved this land. Every brick, every blade of grass, he built with his own two hands. I paused, blinking as if holding back tears. It breaks my heart to be here, fighting family. I never wanted this. I only wanted to live quietly in the home we built together. I saw Marjorie's lips curl into a tiny, triumphant smile. Richard leaned back, smug. They thought I had folded. Then I lifted my chin. Just slightly. But Henry was no fool. He knew what greed could do to blood. He knew how sweet smiles can hide sharp knives. So he prepared for this day. He left something behind. The courtroom stilled. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a folded sheet of yellowed paper. My hands were steady now. My lawyer took it and placed it gently on the judge's bench. This, I said, my voice clear and cutting, was hidden in the property contracts. A clause my husband wrote himself. Signed and witnessed years ago. Gasps rippled through the room. Richard shot to his feet. Objection. He barked, but his lawyer yanked at his sleeve, panic already creeping in. Sit down, Judge Harrington snapped. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. The silence that followed was alive. Marjorie's pearls gleamed like fangs under the light. Their lawyer scrambled to recover. Your Honor, that document is outdated. Possibly forged, irrelevant at best. Enough, the judge interrupted, raising a hand. I will read it myself. Then his voice filled the room, each word of Henry's echoing like thunder. In the event of a dispute regarding ownership or control of Whitaker properties, authority shall remain solely with my lawful spouse, Eleanor Whitaker, until her passing. No claimant, kin or otherwise, shall override her rights. Marjorie made a strangled sound. Richard's fists went white. The gallery erupted in whispers, like wind through dry leaves. And I, finally, lifted my head fully. The mask of frailty was gone. For the first time, they saw me not as an old woman, but as a widow armed with her husband's final weapon. The judge read on, his expression shifting. The firmness in his voice began to waver, his eyes narrowing as he reached the end of the page. Something was wrong. I felt it before he spoke, a chill crawling up my spine. He leaned forward, lips moving silently as he reread a line buried deep in the fine print. A line I had not read myself. My pulse quickened. What had Henry done? The judge stopped reading. The silence that followed was suffocating. What is it, Your Honor? Their lawyer asked, his voice trembling now. But the judge didn't answer. He just stared at that final paragraph, his jaw tightening, his knuckles pressed wide against the wood. Every breath in the courtroom held still. Whatever Henry had written there, it wasn't just protection. It was power. Something enough to make a judge pause mid-sentence. Something that could change everything. And as the seconds dragged out like hours, I realized this fight was far from over. The house wasn't just walls and bricks, it was my battlefield, and my victory. The silence in that courtroom was suffocating. Not the quiet of peace, but the breathless stillness before a storm. Papers rustled faintly in the gallery, someone coughed, too loud. Every eye fixed on Judge Harrington as he stared down at the document my Henry had written so many years ago. Marjorie's manicured nails dug crescents into Richard's arm. He sat rigid, jaw twitching like a man holding rage in his teeth. Their lawyer whispered something urgent, but the judge ignored him, his gaze locked on the paper as though it had swallowed the room whole. My pulse thudded in my ears, not with fear, but with a strange anticipation. Because if there was one thing I knew about my husband, it was this: Henry Whitaker never wrote a weak line, never left a battle unplanned. Finally, Judge Harrington cleared his throat. His voice, when it came, was even, but edged with disbelief. "This clause," he said slowly, "is most unusual, but binding nonetheless." And just like that, I felt the ground shift. The courtroom leaned forward as he began to read aloud. "Should any claimant to this property attempt, through coercion, deceit, or litigation, to wrest ownership from my lawful spouse, such claim shall render them disinherited in full, and the property shall remain solely under Eleanor Whitaker's control for life, and thereafter as per her chosen will." The words struck like thunder. A gasp burst from Marjorie's throat. Richard muttered something coarse, his face darkening to crimson. Their lawyer blinked, as though his entire case had just been pulled out from under him. "And me?" I smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just the slow, certain curve of a woman who had been underestimated one too many times. This is outrageous," Richard exploded, half rising from his seat. "It's a trick. A fraud." She planted that paper. The judge's gavel cracked down like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker. One more outburst and you will be removed." Marjorie switched tactics in a heartbeat. Her voice softened, her eyes shimmering with "we will rehearse" tears. "But Your Honor," she pleaded, "we are family. This estate, this legacy, it belongs to all of us. Surely Henry wouldn't have wanted us punished." Judge Harrington didn't flinch. "On the contrary, Mrs. Simmons," he said coldly, "it seems Henry Whitaker anticipated exactly this kind of behavior." The whispering started then, rising from the gallery like wind through leaves. Their perfect image, their polished reputation, it was unraveling thread by thread. I pushed myself to my feet, leaning lightly on my cane. When I spoke, my voice was calm, almost gentle. The calm that comes when you know you have already won. "You thought you could take from me what Henry and I built together," I said. "You weighed your papers and hid behind your lawyers, thinking I had crumble. But Henry knew you, Richard. He knew you, Marjorie. He knew the poison you hide behind smiles." They flinched like I had slapped them. "And he left you exactly what you deserve, nothing." I turned to the gallery, my voice carrying through the room. "You call yourselves family," I said, "but family protects. Family doesn't circle like vultures waiting for someone to die." The murmurs grew. Faces turned away from Marjorie and Richard. Their shame was public now. Their masks had cracked, and I made sure they stayed that way. Judge Harrington folded the clause with care, setting it on his desk as though it were scripture. His voice rang with finality. "This court finds the clause valid and enforceable. All claims by Richard Whitaker and Marjorie Simmons are nullified. Furthermore, any future attempt to contest Mrs. Whitaker's ownership will be regarded as contempt of court." Bang! The gavel fell. It was over. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months lifted. For the first time since Henry's funeral, I felt the ground beneath me steady again. My house was mine. My peace restored. Richard shoved back his chair, storming toward the exit, red-faced and trembling. But the bailiff blocked his path until the judge exited the room. Marjorie sat frozen in place, her pearls rattling against her throat, her lips trembling. The proud widow act had shattered. All that was left was the scavenger beneath. I walked past her slowly, stopping just long enough to speak. "Mother always said you were a snake," I murmured. "But she never knew you had tried to sink your teeth into me." Her eyes flashed, rage, hatred, humiliation all tangled together. But there was no fight left in her. The gallery buzzed with whispers, sharp, judgmental, merciless. For the first time, the town saw the truth. And she couldn't meet a single pair of eyes. When I stepped through the courthouse doors, sunlight hit my face like a blessing. The air smelled cleaner, freer. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I said nothing. I didn't need to. The papers in my hand said it all. Behind me, Richard and Marjorie emerged, moving quickly, their lawyer trailing behind like a scolded child. They ducked into their sleek car, faces turned away. I stood at the top of the courthouse steps and watched them go. Let them flee. Let them hide. The world knew the truth now. And I, finally, was free. That night, I sat by the fire. Henry's old pipe rested on the mantel. The fold of cloth lay beside me, its ink faded but its message eternal. I traced the paper with my fingertips. Henry had not just loved me, he had armed me. His mind was my shield. His foresight, my fortress. People think betrayal comes from strangers. It doesn't. The worst wounds are cut by family, by the hands that once fed you, by the smiles that hide and be sharp enough to bleed you dry. Richard and Marjorie wanted my home. Instead, Henry's words turned their greed into their own undoing. They lit the fuse themselves. If there is one truth I have learned in my long life, it's this: age is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And love, true love, never dies with the body. It lingers in the spaces between words, in ink on yellowed pages, in quiet acts of protection no one sees coming. They thought me fragile. They thought me blind. But they forgot that time teaches you to wait. And waiting is a weapon. Henry's claws wasn't just a defense. It was a trap. And they walked right into it. The fire crackled softly, casting shadows across the old walls. My house, solid, silent, unbroken. My house. My battlefield. My victory. I leaned back, eyes on the claws one last time, and whispered into the flickering air, half to Henry, half to the ghosts of betrayal now banished for good. They tried to take my home, but instead, they gave me proof that it was mine all along.